Think about the last time you fell in love. That feeling, the electricity, the certainty, the sense that everything finally made sense. The world looked different. You felt more alive than you had in years. Now think about what happened next. Because Erich Fromm, one of the most important psychologists of the 20th century, had a very uncomfortable answer for why that feeling always fades, and it has nothing to do with finding the wrong person. It has everything to do with a misunderstanding so deep, so quietly embedded in the way we were raised, that most people carry it their entire lives without ever questioning it. In this video, we will look at what Fromm discovered and why understanding it might be the most important thing you do for every relationship in your life, including the one with yourself. Stay with me. There is a moment most people know well. You meet someone, and something happens, a current passes between you that is difficult to explain. Suddenly, the walls you have built over years dissolve. You feel seen. You feel known. You feel, for the first time in a long time, not alone. We call this falling in love. And we have been told, by every song and every story, that this feeling is the pinnacle of human experience. That this is what we are all searching for. Erich Fromm looked at this experience and said something that sounds almost cruel the first time you hear it. Falling in love is not love. He wrote, "The experience of falling in love is, by its very nature, not a lasting state. It is an eruption. And, like all eruptions, its intensity is not a measure of its depth. It is a measure of the pressure that was building before it." What is actually happening when we fall in love? Fromm argued that most of us walk through life in a state of quiet separateness. We are isolated behind the walls of our own self-consciousness, our habits, our masks. We smile at people without really being known by them. We share space without sharing ourselves. Then we meet someone, and in that first collision, in those early weeks of falling, the walls come down. Two people who were separate suddenly feel merged. The relief is extraordinary. The loneliness, which was so constant it had become invisible, is suddenly gone. And we mistake the relief of that merger for love itself. Fromm put it precisely. If two people who have been strangers suddenly let the wall between them break down and feel close and feel one, this moment of oneness is one of the most exhilarating experiences in life. But this miracle of sudden intimacy is often facilitated by little more than mutual loneliness, and it fades exactly as fast as it arrived. Think about the couples you know who fall in love intensely and passionately and 3 years later sit across from each other in silence. They did not stop loving each other. They never really began. They were two lonely people who, for a time, were lonely together in a way that felt like connection. This is not a condemnation. Fromm did not write this to make people feel foolish. He wrote it because he believed the confusion between falling in love and loving was one of the great sources of human suffering, and one that could be addressed if people were willing to look at it honestly. Because the alternative, learning to actually love, is one of the most demanding and most rewarding things a human being can undertake. And almost no one is doing it. Here is the question Fromm asked that changes everything. If love is so important, if it is truly what most people say they want more than anything, why do so few people actually study it? We spend years learning our professions. We practice instruments, take classes, read books on subjects that matter far less to us. But love, the thing we claim is most central to our lives, we approach as if it requires no learning at all, as if the feeling is enough. Fromm wrote, "Love is an art, and if you want to learn to love, you must proceed in the same way you have to proceed if you want to learn any other art, with knowledge, with effort, and above all, with the understanding that mastery takes a long time. But there is a problem. Most of us are not interested in learning to love. We are interested in being loved. Think about that distinction for a moment. The question most people are actually asking is not, how do I become someone who loves well? The question is, how do I become someone who attracts love? How do I make myself desirable? How do I find the right person who will finally love me the way I need to be loved? This is, Fromm said, like a musician who spends all their time worrying about whether the audience likes them and no time actually learning to play. The result is a world full of people desperately trying to be lovable, and almost no one genuinely working on their capacity to love. So what does actually loving someone look like, according to Fromm? He identified 4 essential elements, not feelings, but active practices. The first is care. Not the sentiment of caring, but the active, effortful concern for the growth and life of the person you love. A mother who loves her child does not just feel warmth she gets up in the night. She worries, she acts. Love that does not act is not love, it is sentiment. The second is responsibility. Not the weight of obligation, but the willingness to respond, to be present to what the other person actually needs, not what you want to give them. The third is respect, and here Fromm was very specific. Respect means seeing a person as they actually are, not as you want them to be. Most of what we call love is actually projection. We love the image we have created of the other person, not the person themselves. To truly respect someone is to allow them to be different from your expectations. The fourth is knowledge. Not information about someone, but a genuine curiosity, a willingness to keep discovering who they are, even after years of familiarity. The person who stops being curious about their partner has already begun to stop loving them. These 4 things are learnable. They can be practiced. They can be developed the way a musician develops an ear, the way a painter develops an eye. And they begin, Fromm argued, with one place almost everyone overlooks. Fromm wrote something that sounds, at first, like something you would see on a motivational poster. He said that you cannot genuinely love another person if you do not love yourself. But stay with me, because what Fromm meant by this is almost the opposite of what that phrase has come to mean in popular culture. He was not talking about self-care. He was not talking about knowing your worth or filling your own cup first or any of the other phrases that have been detached from their meaning through overuse. He was making a much more specific and uncomfortable point. He wrote, "Selfishness and self-love, far from being identical, are actually opposites. The selfish person does not love himself too much, he loves himself too little." Think about the most demanding people you have known in relationships. The ones who constantly needed reassurance, who became jealous or controlling, who gave and gave until they collapsed and then asked why nobody appreciated them, who could never quite settle into the security of being loved. Fromm's diagnosis was counterintuitive. These are not people who love themselves too much. They are people who do not love themselves at all. The constant need for external validation is not greed. It is a symptom of an internal emptiness that they are trying to fill from outside. And here's the connection that matters. A person who does not have a stable, settled relationship with themselves cannot be genuinely present for another person. They are always, even unconsciously, using the relationship to manage their own anxiety, to feel okay about themselves, to be reassured that they are enough. This is not love. This is what Fromm called a symbiotic relationship. 2 people holding each other up rather than 2 people choosing each other freely. And the painful irony is that these relationships, the ones born out of need rather than genuine love, are precisely the ones that feel the most intense at the beginning because the need is the most powerful. So what does self-love actually look like? Not self-obsession, not the constant curation of your own image. Fromm described it as something much quieter, a basic respect for your own life, your own growth, your own experience. A willingness to take your own inner world seriously, to feel what you feel without immediately suppressing it, to know what you value without constantly deferring to what others value. The capacity to love another person grows naturally from this, because a person who is genuinely at home in themselves has something real to bring to another person, not a need, not a performance, presence. And it is that presence, more than any feeling, that is the foundation of everything Fromm called love. Fromm wrote The Art of Loving in 1956. He could not have known about dating apps. He had never heard of swiping, or ghosting, or love bombing, or situationships. And yet, reading him today, it is hard to avoid the feeling that he is describing something he has seen with his own eyes. He argued that modern capitalist society had done something very specific to human relationships. It had turned them into a marketplace. He wrote, "Modern man has transformed himself into a commodity. He experiences his life energy as an investment with which he should make the highest profit, given his situation and the situation of the market. In the love market, this translates directly. We present our best version, our most attractive photos, our most interesting stories, our most appealing personality. We assess others in the same terms. Are they a good deal? Are they worth my investment? Can I do better? And when the transaction fails to deliver the expected returns, when the person turns out to be more complicated than their profile, when the initial intensity fades and is replaced by the ordinary difficulty of knowing someone real, we move on. We return to the market. The problem Fromm identified was not that people are shallow. It is that the structure of modern life makes it almost impossible to develop the patience, the depth, and the vulnerability that genuine love requires, because all of those things are inversions of market logic. Markets reward speed. Love requires slowness. Markets reward efficiency. Love requires waste, the beautiful, unhurried waste of time spent with someone for no reason other than that you want to be with them. Markets reward optionality. Love requires commitment, the decision to stop looking, to invest everything here, to become genuinely knowable to one person. Fromm did not think this was hopeless, but he did think it required something almost countercultural, the conscious decision to opt out of the logic of the marketplace when it comes to the people you love. And he had a very specific idea of what that looked like in practice. Fromm was not interested in philosophy for its own sake. He wanted to know, what do you actually do? He identified several practices that, taken together, constitute what he called the discipline of love, not rules. Practices in the way that a musician practices scales. Not because scales are music, but because scales build the capacity for music. The first is concentration. By this, Fromm meant something very simple and very rare: the ability to be fully present with another person, not physically present while mentally elsewhere, not half listening while composing your reply, but actually there taking in what the person in front of you is saying, how they are saying it, what they are not saying. This sounds easy. It is not. Most of us have become so accustomed to distraction that genuine concentration, the kind that makes another person feel genuinely seen, is something we experience rarely and remember for a long time when it happens. The second practice is patience. Not the patience of tolerating someone's flaws, the patience of allowing someone's growth to happen at its own pace. Fromm observed that we often love the image of who we want someone to become and then feel betrayed when they remain themselves. Patience, in his sense, means releasing that image and choosing the person who is actually there. The third is the practice of what Fromm called standing in love, rather than falling into it. Falling is passive. It happens to you. standing is active. It is a choice you make again and again. Not once, at the beginning, in a rush of feeling, but every day, in small and unremarkable moments. The decision to turn toward rather than away, to stay curious rather than familiar, to invest attention in someone even when the initial excitement has been replaced by something quieter and more durable. And the fourth, perhaps the most important, is what Fromm simply called faith. Not religious faith. The faith of believing in another person's potential, trusting that they are capable of growth, even when the evidence is not yet visible. Frankl, whom we met in our last video, called this meaning. Fromm called it love. They were, in the end, describing the same orientation toward life, the willingness to see what could be and commit yourself to it before you have any guarantee of the outcome. This is not comfortable. It is the opposite of the safety that most of us are looking for when we seek love. But it is the only direction in which love is actually found. You do not need to overhaul your relationships to begin. Fromm did not ask that of anyone. What he suggested was something much smaller and much more honest. Today, choose one person in your life, not necessarily the person you love most, just one person who is actually present in your day. And ask yourself this question: am I seeing this person, or am I seeing the version of them that I have already decided they are? This is a harder question than it sounds, because most of the time we do not see the people we know. We see a fixed image, the one we assembled from past conversations, past disappointments, past expectations, and we respond to the image rather than the person. The practice Fromm offered was simply this: to notice when you are doing that, not to judge yourself for it, just to notice, and then, once, to try looking again, without the image, without the verdict already decided. In that moment of genuine attention, something shifts. Not dramatically, not with the electricity of falling in love, but with something more lasting. The quiet recognition that the person in front of you is real and still unfinished and still becoming something you have not yet fully seen. That recognition is not a feeling, it is a practice. And every time you return to it, you are doing what Fromm spent his whole life trying to describe, and what most people spend their whole lives searching for without ever finding. You are learning to love. If this video made you think of someone specific, someone you want to see more clearly, or love more honestly, that is not accidental. Share it with them, not as advice, just as a quiet thing you found. And if you have not yet watched our first video on why happiness cannot be pursued and what Viktor Frankl discovered instead, it is waiting for you. The two ideas are more connected than they seem. Subscribe to the Lucid Mind not to fill a feed, but to keep walking.